Hello, I'm Roberta Winters, past president of the League of Women Voters of Radnor Township. As you know, the League of Women Voters is famous for its ability to register voters and to provide nonpartisan information about the candidates each election. Our site, vote411.org, is really the place to go when you're planning to make your vote count on election day. There you will find everything you need to vote, be it your registration information, where your polling place is, what's on the ballot, and even a little bit about each of the candidates. So remember to check Vote 411 as you plan to vote in the next election. As you also may know, the League of Women Voters is concerned about civic participation. That's one of our key missions. However, each year it becomes increasingly difficult to engage voters in participating in our local, state, and national levels. Participating in local government, be it as an elected official or as an advocate or even just observing township meetings, is very important to helping to make democracy work. Why is promoting civic engagement becoming more and more difficult? Well, I, like many people across the country, believe it has something to do with the diminishing role of our local press and their respective journalists. Believe it or not, this was even a topic at the League's National Convention held in June. And given what I've observed as a resident over the past few decades, the increasingly lack of press coverage of key issues in Radnor Township is a growing concern. While we have nearly all of our township meetings and our school committee meetings televised and shown live as well as available on demand, it still is very tedious to monitor all those agendas, keep an eye on those meetings, and figure out what's going on. We have commissioners who put out local newsletters. We have some who don't. We have some of our school district parents who get informed about things, others do not. Some residents have access to different types of information, and we need to know what's happening. What is the status of our local press? Today I'm delighted to have with me a student intern, Edy MacKenzie. She has luckily chosen for us the topic of news, access, and literacy as her summer project. Welcome, Edy. Would you be so kind as to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I am an RHS student. I will be a senior at Radnor High School this fall, and I'm very interested in math and science, but I'm also super passionate about journalism. So I work with the Radnorite. I have written for them my entire high school career, and I, along with two of my fellow students, will be editor-in-chief of the Radnorite this year.
Wow. Well, I'm fortunate, as I mentioned before, to go to convention and get a lot of resources about the issues of the press and accessibility. Did you find those useful?
I did find those useful. The Colorado League of Women Voters report was very thorough and extremely helpful in my research.
Well, just what is local journalism anyway?
So local journalism is journalism specific to a certain community that wouldn't necessarily have the same impact that if it was shown in a different community. So if we learned about stuff that's going on in Bucks County, maybe we wouldn't be as interested. So that would be local news for Bucks County. Also, national news has the ability to turn into local news. For example, with the COVID virus, that is a national news issue. However, case numbers and certain data about schools opening and access to vaccinations in this area are local news because they wouldn't be relevant to a different community. So local news is also all about connecting a community and keeping them together and informed.
Well, why is local news so important?
Well, local news is so important for a lot of reasons. First of all, there are local elections, and there are ways that we as community members have to show our civic engagement, and one of those is especially voting. So in the Constitution, when the country was formed, democracy is based on the fact that voters are going to have information and they're going to know about their community and their candidates that are running, so that they have the ability to make informed decisions while voting and that their vote matters.
Well, I know a lot of people trust the local news, but, we hear a lot about fake news, misinformation. Is this a problem?
Yes. So with the lack of local news, and especially, I'll get into this a little bit, but when local news diminishes, there becomes less trust in national news, and misinformation runs rampant, especially on social media sites. When local news diminishes, people tend to turn toward less journalism and more just post-worthy social media sites, and that's where misinformation can run rampant, because the basis of journalism is integrity. It's about fact-checking and having transparency and showing their readers the truth. And journalism is all about about being impartial. And social media sites and not validated local news, they don't get to show people the truth.
So they can put their opinions out,
misinformation
or
runs
myth.
rampant.
They don't have to check their sources. They don't have to have any kinds of reliability there. So, do you think good journalism then promotes good citizenship, because at least you're basing, what you're thinking about what's actually a fact?
Yes, it is very goes hand in hand. Good journalism shows people what's really happening in their community, what's happening to their tax dollars, what's going on with their elected officials, what the elected officials are running for, what they've done in the past. And all of that information is very impactful when someone is making a decision at the ballot box. You can't go and vote without being an informed citizen about your community. And journalism ensures that people are informed without misinformation, without partiality, and informed in a factual manner. So journalism is incredibly important to building engaged citizenship. And it's also about a sense of community. Journalism, which is local journalism, is diminishing, and that also brings with it the local news, like wedding announcements and obituaries and things that bring communities together and teach them about the people that live near them, and not just national news, people that live hundreds and hundreds of miles away. It definitely brings together neighborhoods, but not in a misinformation, gossipy sort of way, in a factual, interesting, journalistic spirit way.
Well, that, I know a lot of people just get the newspaper and go right to the obituaries or right to the social column, because that's where they find out things they want. And if people want to know someone's opinion, they can read the editorial section or the opinion section. So it's not necessarily all fact, but at least they separate the fact from the opinion, which you don't always get on other sources. So is the press then really important for promoting democracy? I know you've mentioned how important it is to voting and understanding a community, so you know what the issues are. So democracy is something?
Democracy is incredibly important. Democracy was founded on the basis of the free press. The First Amendment is, in fact, free press and free the ability to create journalism without interference from the government, without interference from higher ups, and just true press, because press was the basis of the voting system. Because without proper information, without knowing what's going on in your community, how does your vote matter? Because it's not informed. So journalism has been said to be the fourth pillar of democracy, because how can the democracy function without nonpartisan, straight information, but also engaged opinion pieces and op-eds and things like that are also important. It's just getting to learn about your community and what people believe and people. Yeah.
Well, I know that First Amendment says the United States prohibits the government from making laws that regulate an establishment of religion or prohibit the free exercise of religion or the abridgment of the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, and the freedom of assembly, or the right to petition. So this was adopted in 1791. So it seems like if that was important 200 years ago, not abridging the right to a free press, it's more important today.
Yes.
So did any of the famous presidents say anything about this?
Yes.
I think it was James Madison, wasn't
it was James Madison.
And he said this.
A popular government without popular information or the means of acquiring it is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy, or perhaps both. And James Madison said that in 1822.
1822. And he said if we didn't have a free press, it was going to be a farce.
Yes.
I think he knew what he was talking about. Now, tell me, did COVID help or hurt the free press?
I would say overall COVID did hurt the free press because, as we know, funding for businesses all around went down during COVID, and the economy struggled during COVID, which also kind of brought down the local news. However, there was a little bit of light in that a lot of people became more engaged in their local journalism and started to see the importance in learning about case numbers, learning about how things were staying open, and more people became engaged in that way, but it wasn't very sustainable. And personally for me, for the Radnorite, we had a lot more student journalists come out during the COVID time because they had more time and they wanted to learn more, and they wanted to write more, and they wanted to engage more. And we also had a lot more readership because I think people they wanted to engage with their community while isolated. So I believe that COVID brought out that local journalism is more important than ever. However, there was low morale among writers across the country, and fighting social media and everything regarding like the rumor mill and everything like that was definitely disappointing and difficult for journalists everywhere. And especially the economic parts, advertising has been huge for local journalism. The revenue for that has gone down very, very sharply over the past decade, and that has very negatively impacted the decline of journalism.
Well, do you think, given what you've said with all the social media pressure and with the ads hitting the dust, do you think newspapers will be able to survive?
I do personally think newspapers will be able to survive. I have talked with some local journalists, and I have also read local journalists, and they all kind of come to the conclusion that local journalism is something that people still care about, and that there are always going to be journalists out there that continue to believe in the First Amendment and the importance of journalism to a society. And journalism is not going away anytime soon, but I have heard that it needs to change. There are ways that local journalism needs to adapt to fit changing times, and that includes switching from print to digital formats. And when I talked with former journalists, I expected a lot of them to say, we want to stick with print, we want old time, like how it used to be, just go back to how it was. But overwhelmingly, local journalists don't have a huge attachment to print and more have an attachment to getting to the public. So if they need to switch to digital formats, they can do that. And especially considering there are environmental downsides to print newspapers. And so, but it does involve a transition from going to print to digital, but it doesn't just involve that. It involves appealing to the public and adapting and changing and going through a period of struggle to get to a side where journalism is different and journalism needs to change to fit a changing generation.
Well, just where do we get our press today in Radnor? I mean, what is there available? Are we in? I've heard something called a news desert. What is
news desert? News desert means when there's only one or less local papers in a community. So we have the Mainline Times in Suburban, which is very important, but it does cover a very large amount of the main line. So you could look at, I just was looking at a copy the other day, and all of the cover stories are about Lower Merion, are about Norristown, are about different towns around here, and everybody in Radnor doesn't have the information that they need for their community, and that lessens the amount that journalists are able to cover. And also, there's just less information that is available and being able to come out. And then there's online platforms such as Patch or Nextdoor. When I ask a lot of friends and neighbors where they get their information, a lot of them say websites such as Patch or Nextdoor. And although these are places to get quick updates on why the police are in your neighborhood or where the next meeting is or anything like that. There are problems with these sort of formats because it's not journalism. It's not creating jobs. It's not creating community. It's not stories. It's very quick updates, and they usually let them out multiple times, and it's with a very large outlet. So although it's easy for getting that quick information, nobody's reading that, nobody's engaging with that. So it doesn't. And I looked, and they were all mostly written by the same person, these articles. So they're not very widespread. They're not very engaging.
And I know one thing I found about when I used to write in school, they would say, who, what, where, when, why. You put that information in the first paragraph, and then you sort of build on that. And sometimes they only get to the who, where, what, where, and why, and they never really build on it, go into it and develop a story so you really understand it.
And talking with past journalists, that's what they love about their jobs, or loved about their jobs, because journalism is about finding people and talking to people and learning about their lives and getting to share that. And journalism is about investigating. It's about opinion. It's about talking to other people. It's about just getting the whole story. It's about engagement. It's about newsrooms and trying to learn from others. It's all about learning. And one journalist described it as learning every single day, kind of like you're back in school, like you learn something new. And that's the basis of journalism. And small little reports aren't journalism at its finest.
So this news desert we're in is creating a lot of problems all the way across society. Yes. So tell me, are there nonprofits or anybody else helping to support the papers? Because obviously, if advertisements and everything is being put up on social media, who's to help?
Yeah, there's been a lot of ideas about where funding needs to come from. I read the Columbia Journalism Review believes that they can do public funding from the government if it's done in a non-biased, people vote for public funding kind of initiative. However, there are issues with getting government funding for local news because then there's some sort of government control over local journalism, and that goes strictly against the First Amendment. However, I've heard that large corporations have started buying newspapers and that it can also be extremely damaging because they get to decide what happens. However, the Philadelphia Inquirer is working with a nonprofit, the Lenfest Institute, who values journalism and has been working with them to fund their operations. And it's a very interesting partnership that I'm excited to see how it goes in the future. And it's very interesting how the Lenfest Institute is helping fund the Philly Inquirer so that the Philly Inquirer doesn't get held up in big corporations or even government funding, and they can still live. So that's definitely an option for the future of journalism, but it's interesting to see how that will go. There's definitely journalism has to change. Advertising isn't going to be the same as it used to be, especially because people with information so widely available on the internet, which is free, people aren't as interested in paying for subscriptions, paying for print formats. So there definitely has to be a new way of garnering revenue for these local journalism companies. So.
Well, I think we have a work cut out for us.
Yeah, there's definitely a period of struggle that must go through before the change can really happen, before journalism can see itself on the other side. But from what I've learned, journalism will come out on the other side. It's not going away anytime soon.
Well, that's real optimistic. I hope, it works. I wanted to check with you, now that you've talked to us so much about the need for local journalism and the problems that the local journalists are facing. Do you have any final words you'd like to give us, other than the fact that we're going to turn around at some point?
My final word would definitely be stay engaged, read as much as you can, even write if you can. If you're a student watching this, being involved in the Radnary is one of the most important things that I've done my entire school year. I value it so much, and I get to learn about my community. I've talked to business members, I've talked to politicians, I've talked to anybody and everybody, I've talked to administration, and you learn a lot. And even by reading these articles, you learn a lot. So staying engaged is important, writing is important, and just reading and staying and learning and making sure that you make informed decisions as a citizen, especially if you're over 18 and you're voting. You should know who candidates are, and you should get this information from factual sources.
And the candidates are one thing, but also you need to have those local papers there so you know the issues, so you know the candidates are speaking on things that you care about and share your opinion, because without local press, we don't know if they're working for the common good or for some corporate entity that bought the local paper.
Yes.
So it's really important to keep your eyes and ears open and pay attention. So I'd like to thank you, Edy, for coming and sharing today. And we'd also like to know that the League of Women Voters is open to all. And Edy, as a student, can join the League of Women Voters for nothing. However, others who may want to join the League can look to our website, lwv.radnor.org, lwvradnor.org. We are an inclusive group. We support diversity and inclusion, and we hope you'll join. We are grateful to you, our audience, in learning with us today about the importance of the local press and the need for advocacy to keep our journalists going. We are indeed also appreciative of Mainline Television Network for their ongoing efforts to educate you, the public, on important issues such as this. Their willingness to air shows like this and to engage our young people, such as Edy, provides opportunities for growth not only for our young people, but for you, our audience. Thank you. Let's keep our local press alive, as well as public access television, as viable options today and in the future to build civic participation. Thank you.